Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Music Nerds Record Club. Somehow we have made it to episode number 7. We started off in January and we have 6 curators. Not everybody can make every episode, but of the 6 curators, we each took 1 month and one iconic album. And our first curator, Joe, who brought us Combat Rock by The Clash back in chilly January, on this steamy July night, it's going to take us in a completely different direction than we've been for the last 6 episodes, with an instrumental jazz album by Alice Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders. And I'm Teacher on the Radio. With me is Scott Greenberg from Charlotte, North Carolina, host of That's No Honest Man Can Pay, my former co-DJ from WTTU in Cookeville, and an amazing musicologist in her own right, Amy Rock, out of Nashville, Tennessee. Also out of Nashville, Tennessee, is my sib from another crib, Rick Quinn. So let's do this, gang. I'm going to turn it over to Joe to get us started, and then each of us, you'll have your turn, and we've done this enough times now that we all know what to do. So take it away, Joe.
Hello. Good evening. Hey, friends, and person out there watching. In choosing this, I really thought it was time to discuss a work by a woman. It hadn't happened yet, and I know none of us deliberately neglected her, but somehow even though I feel sort of programmed to anyway. I don't know where I'm going with that thought, but I thought a lot about it, and I thought about maybe the Pretenders, and I got down to Alice Coltrane or Joanna Newsom, who share the harp as one of their main interests. And then Joanna wasn't available on Spotify, and I thought that was probably a good decider in the whole thing, and I went with Alice Coltrane. What I didn't realize is that this is kind of the year of Alice Coltrane. What that means is that her estate and Impulse Records, along with a lot of other arts groups, the Detroit Jazz Festival, the New York Historical Society, there's a ballet in San Francisco, there's events happening all over the country. So what I thought would be a difficult album to research turned out to have a bounty of really fresh material. I have links for them all. I can share them with you at some point if you want to read a little of what I read and laugh at how I ended up regurgitating it. None of these thoughts are my own. One of the coolest things I discovered was that Alice was from Detroit. She was born in 1937. Her father was a preacher. Her mother was a singer in a lot of choirs around town, and she was sort of an early musical prodigy. She studied classical music in Detroit. She started gigging around town as a teenager, and right about 1960, she headed off to Paris, where she studied with a lot of people, including the great Bud Powell. Then she met a guy, what's his name? Ernie, not his last name's Haggard. They were married for a year, if that. It was a couple of years later that she met John Coltrane, who John became her second husband. John became father to her first child, daughter Michelle, and they had 3 children together. She was already pretty established as a jazz musician, but when McCoy Tyner left John's band, she replaced and he's one of the Titans, of course. She replaced him and stood in ably, and she was on the recording and the touring for one of the greatest albums in jazz history, which was A Love Supreme, which is still one I'm trying to digest all these years later. They had 3 kids. She was already starting to record her own stuff, and when he died of liver cancer in 67 or 68, at that point, I think she had already released her first record, or was close to it, which was this one, A Monastic Trio. She had only picked up the harp at John's suggestion. Together, her and John were sort of John introduced her to Hindu spiritual practices, which became sort of the guiding force and kind of what saved her life after John's death. But the album we're going to talk about, which is Journey in Satchidananda. Satchidananda was I guess essentially her guru. He was a yoga master, and she was introduced to him by a friend who knew him in hopes of finding something to help her cope with her deep grief, and it ended up having a profound effect on her life. She was already headed in a Hindu spiritual direction, but her meeting with Satchidananda sort of pushed her in that direction, where her music became epically spiritual. And she recorded in November of 1970. She recorded Journey, which features Pharoah Sanders, but some of the other greats of, and it's funny in jazz, you always got to talk about the additional players. She had Pharoah Sanders on there, Cecil McBee and Charlie Hayden both playing bass, Rashid Ali on drums, Majid Shabazz on bells and tambourine, and two Indian classical musicians, Tulsi and Vishnu Wood, also played on the album as well. It's got all those sounds on it that sounds super cliche. The sort of sitar that you hear on The Simpsons to indicate some sort of trippy thing. It's there, but it never sounds. It sounds like she's got skilled players playing it in not a cliche way. It's a beautiful. I have so many notes on this and could go in so many different directions. She. It's an album that's both easy to listen to compared to a lot of experimental jazz records. It's easy, it's beautiful. It's really a remarkable album that speaks to evolution and healing and the stripping away and rebuilding of the self, and an act of preservation and healing. She went on to record a number of more records, but she had already moved out to California after this, where she started an ashram, and she took the name Swahimi. I spelled this out twice. Turya Sangatananda, or Turiya for short. She wrote a number of books on spiritual practices, and even a number of those books are being reissued this year in this celebration of her life. But it's just an album I've been listening to for years without really listening to it as regularly as I've listened to it in the last 3-4 months. I got the vinyl. It sounds beautiful. I wrote a lot in my notes about how I feel about jazz, and it always feels like it's at some emotional remove. I could never feel comfortable enough speaking about music like jazz, like I would about I don't know, drive-by truckers in a particular chord change, or how the drummer uses his brushes in this part. I would never deign to do that about jazz, but this album connects with me in a deeper way, and I've been discovering a lot of other of her music. A week after this was released, she played a concert at Carnegie Hall, which was also released for the first time this year, like found tapes and everything. It's an epic concert. I think it was released in Japan with one song as the entire record, but now it's out again. It's epic and beautiful. It's got 2 drummers and 2 bass players going at the same time, but it never sounds like noise. It's amazing. She's amazing. It's great to see her get her due. Finally, she was certainly yoked to John's art and career and legacy from the very beginning of her career, and it's nice to see her really escape it finally. Anyway, that's what I got.
Thanks, Joe. And thank you for hipping me to this record. You know, the older I get, the greater appreciation I have for jazz and instrumental in general. I've especially developed a really strong passion for the Hammond B3 organ, but that's another conversation for another time. So, Alice Coltrane is one of these artists who, a long list of artists who I've known of, but never taken the opportunity to familiarize myself with. So I appreciate getting that chance with this record. And I've sat with it for a couple of weeks and listened to it about 4 or 5 times. As a matter of fact, I listened to it this afternoon when I was at the Y doing an hour of cardio because I was just really not in the mood and I needed something that just kind of got me out of my head. And this was it. From moment one, I heard the drone of the sitars, I heard the harps. I knew I was being whisked away to another place, and it's just really great for that kind of meditative, just zone out, just let the music take you where it's going to take you, and just for I apologize for the cliche, but it's great to just tune in, turn on, and drop out. Eating no hallucinogens necessary. Um, Definitely, this is. I like, again, like Joe said, with jazz albums, you want to take a look and see who's playing because every legendary jazz record, it's a murderer's row. Look no further than Kind of Blue, which Coltrane played on. John Coltrane, that is. But yeah, Pharaoh Saunders shines on this. I'm not sure if any of this is recorded live, but I noticed that like at the very end there's applause. So I don't know if maybe that last track was recorded live or if maybe there's just people in the studio clapping. It doesn't really matter. I did take note that of the 5 tracks on the album, the 2 songs that begin and end are these epics. And the one in the middle is the shortest. I think maybe clocking in at about 3 minutes and change. And I think that one in the middle is like the closest that you have to a traditional or normal jazz composition. The other 4, they kind of ride the line of balance. I'm listening to it, I'm going, they're getting a little bit avant-garde, but they don't go quite there. It's not quite traditional. It's not quite avant-garde. It's somewhere in the middle. That middle one, I kind of feel is like okay, we've taken you out to Mars. We're bringing you back down to just recenter you. And then we're going to take you off to Venus. I don't know. That's just my impression. But all I know is that I dug it. And like Joe says, it's hard to really speak like you know what you're talking about with jazz. I think jazz is kind of like poetry in the sense that it's like an eel. It's mercurial. Once you feel like you've got it nailed, you don't have it nailed, which means you shouldn't try to nail it in the first place. You should just plug in and enjoy it. And that's exactly what I did. So thank you for hipping us to this, Joe.
Awesome. Yeah, big agree on just having an album that you can just listen to and enjoy and not have to think about the lyrics. I feel like I'm the one in the group that's always like, I don't care about the lyrics. Just if the music's good, I'm interested in it. So this is my chance to shine in that way. So thank you for that. This album just really does make me feel so good and peaceful. I grew up on jazz saxophone, so that familiar language of jazz sax just kind of grounds me. And just the album's so unique with the Eastern instruments involved. The tempura, which is what sounds like a sitar, is just so magical. It almost sounds like what is a parody of Eastern music, but it just is and is just incorporated so beautifully into the language of jazz. And I really loved that. And I don't think I've ever heard jazz harp before. I think I only know of one jazz performer at all. And she's from Nashville Timber. She's been playing out for 10 years at least around here. And last time I saw her, she was a guest with Me Without You on their final show in Nashville, which was super cool. But like, that's it. I wish that harp was more accessible. Just, it's such a huge instrument. I don't think a lot of school bands are letting kids take them home. So that's kind of a tragedy because it is so beautiful on this album. The last song, Isis and Osiris, is such a jam. I think you mentioned it sounds live because it was recorded at Alice's house in Long Island. And I wish I was in that room. It just was such a perfect jam. It would have been so transcendent to be in that space while it was playing. But yeah, I've been sitting and reading books more this month, so being in a jazz kick goes really well with that. I've been enjoying just turning on this album and other stuff from Alice Coltrane and just kicking back and vibing. So thank you for the jazzy month, Joe. And that's what I got to say about this one for now.
As we go, we will probably have time for Joe to wrap us up and bring us back together, and maybe have people have an opportunity to, as we like to say, double dip on this one when we come back around before the end of the half hour, especially since we are shy one of our normal members. We got 5 co-hosts tonight instead of 6. Teacher on the radio here, and let me just say that anybody who knows me knows how interwoven spirituality and music are for me personally. And so any record that so overtly addresses the intersection of spirituality and music is a record that I'm interested in. But something else that's really like super exciting to me about this is the particular intersections that we have here. So we have the African-American community, the Black community in specific, the Black avant-garde counterculture community intersecting with the hippie counterculture of the late 60s and the early 70s, and the wide interest in Eastern spirituality that came at that time period for the counterculture. If you go to the Bay Area, which is one of the key nests of the counterculture, you can go to the John Coltrane Church, which is an entire religion that is completely based on the album The Love Supreme. Now, the day that I attended there, it was very informal and it was a very, very small attendance. My Detroit homies and probably Rick, Amy, all of you probably aren't even going to be surprised to hear this, but I do occasionally visit predominantly Black churches. And it seems like whenever I do, they end up handing me the mic and asking me to preach or testify or poeticize. Anyway, so I ended up getting to preach in the John Coltrane Church in San Francisco, California, which was truly thrilling to me. But I also echo some of our curator's remarks around jazz and how intimidated it is for me to talk about jazz. And like Joe said, it's easier for him to talk about the Drive-By Truckers. Well, it's easier for me to talk about Jason Isbell and Tyler Childers and Zach Bryan, my folk country boys of the day, than it would be for me to talk about jazz music. But also, interestingly enough, is this tradition of Eastern spirituality that Alice is interested in is linked up to yoga. And that's one of the first things I thought when I listened to this album is, I wonder how many yoga classes have been conducted with this as the background music, while the yoga teacher instructs and guides each of the class members in the different poses, the different asanas that we do in yoga class. I could get down. I want to be your downward dog. That's a mixed metaphor if I ever heard one. These songs make me say stupid stuff like that. Also, I want to refer. Joe mentioned his sources, and I hope, Joe, you will share your sources. And I wanted to share one of my sources here, which is a guy by the name of Matt Marble, who had 44 episodes of the Secret Sounds podcast, and he had it on all the public podcast channels like Spotify and Apple Music. And then he decided to put them into an archive that is subscriber only. And I just found out that Matt Marble is, really struggling to build up. He's an independent scholar, mostly of musicology. He's amazing. And I found out he really needed my $5 subscription. So I shot Matt Marble, the $5 to unlock his Alice Coltrane episode, to listen to it as we were building up today. And so with DIY or do-it-yourself religion, or hybrid religions, or religions that are a cultural, melange or potpourri, as this one is, behind Alice's work, I think it's sometimes possible for people to get cynical or snarky about it, but it's really genuine. There's a genuine sincerity and a depth of investment here that I think is profound. And I've not gone on a deep dive, but I am very there's just a vibe, as people have been talking about the vibe of this record. This vibe just drips with sincerity and authenticity for me. So whatever it is that they're up to, whatever that vibe, that groove, that trip, that tune in, turn on, drop out vibe is, it's a sincere seeking after the divine in all of its possible manifestations. And I just find that completely endearing and enchanting. And because of how religion has become so negatively configured in our current culture, because of kind of some of the crimes of the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, each has its more nefarious representatives in our world today, especially around the political violence. And and that's Christians, Muslims, and Jews are all guilty of that to a certain extent. And so to see, and also Hindus in India with their leader, their extremist leader in India, they're committing violence against their Muslim neighbors. And so just in a world where there's so much religious violence, to see religion being used for ecstasy and joy and beauty and peace and truth the way this is so enchanting and exciting for me. The thing that I also want to just tip is that there's a genre that Alice Coltrane does on some of her other records, which is a chanting form. I've heard it called kirtan. And when I was listening to Matt Marble's podcast, I think he was calling them bhajans, but they just start chanting the name of God. I mean, and the most common, because it's been the most in pop culture, is the Hare Krishna movement. They would just go around singing Hare Krishna. Well, you can chant all these different names of different deities. And there's a track called Govinda Jai Jai, which is my favorite of the Alice Coltrane chants that I've heard. And that I would put that on probably before I put this one on, because I think the vocalization adds something to the experience. And I was introduced to kirtan by a woman out of Nashville, Tennessee, who also teaches yoga and is also a singer, is also the daughter of a minister. She's the daughter of a Methodist minister, and her name is Amy Barnes. And she's got a couple of albums that are out there on the streaming services that I'd be happily refer anybody to. But she does this chanting style that Alice Coltrane does on some of her other albums. And it's just, if you're in that mood, you can really get into it. It's really great for, like Scott mentioned, going to the gym. It's really great for like just kind of tripping out, blissing out. But the chanting side of it, I think, adds a added level of intensity to the devotion. I want to express my gratitude to Joe for after our 6 first records, just taking us off in a completely different direction with this record than we had been on our previous ones. And I think Alice Coltrane is just a phenomenal choice. And I'm really thrilled what Joe said too, that there's a revival right now of Alice Coltrane going on in the music world. And Rick is going to take us into the last, and then when he's done, we'll have a couple minutes for double dipping. I went over my time because you guys went under your time. That's what happens when you get to go last, I guess. Here's Rick.
Thanks so much. And I'm glad that the providence of the picking of the hat put me behind you tonight, Andrew, because I think we're just going to tag team on this spiritual aspect of this magnificent piece of music. So I echo my colleagues' gratitude to you, Joe, for bringing this to our attention, letting us dive into its waters and experience it. Much like, I want to echo what Scott said, I was familiar with Alice Coltrane in terms of reputation. I'd seen the records. I had not spent any time going into the music, so I was very glad for this opportunity here. So again, I know I'm repeating what's been said before by some of my astute colleagues, but I can't approach this as a jazz aficionado or someone who understands the intricacies of jazz as an art. Um, it, it I just tried to open myself up to the experience, and especially when I began to learn that it was a not just a spiritual expression, but a spiritual exercise that Alice Coltrane and her collaborators were entering in on. I just tried to open myself to that, and I'll just speak briefly about the bookends, the Journey to Satchidananda, and Isis and Osiris that open and close the album. I had not thought that I would be as drawn in and mesmerized by harp music, and I say that because my main exposure to the harp, quick story, was a harpist out at Opryland Hotel back in the 80s here in Nashville. There's an opulent indoor garden in this hotel, and somewhere near the middle of it, on Fridays and Saturdays nights, there was a very flamboyant Liberace-like harpist who would play beautiful music. There'll be fountains and a light show. It was nice. It was cheesy. It was also a cheap date because you could just walk into the hotel, mill around, and then get out. This is something completely different, and I was blown away. The first song is like experiencing the building block, the elemental building blocks of life and a spiritual experience from a variety of ways through a variety of instruments. The bass is like the groundedness of the earth, the heartbeat. It keeps you grounded as it goes along. And in comes Alice's harp. It's ethereal. It's ecstatic, transcendent. I know it's cliche to say it's angelic, but angelic not in the sense of those beautiful creatures we think of in pageants, but angelic in the sense of the bizarre multi-winged creatures in the Hebrew Bible who that sort of speak to something beyond our ability to express it. In the midst of that, there's the Indian tambura, which is droning and meditative and hypnotic, and then the tenor sax weaves a narrative that speaks but never can bring expression to what's going on. Anyway, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I just know that I was drawn up out of myself in all of this. The last song where they use the improvisation of jazz to retell a mythic narrative of dismemberment and rememberment, of destruction and new creation. I was just blown away from it, and so I'm so grateful for the opportunity to look at this and hopefully to explore Alice Coltrane's music much deeper than that. So thank you, Joe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Joe, do you want to unmute yourself and say anything you want to kind of wrap this in a bow of any kind?
Well, I can do my best. I had a few thoughts I wanted to get across that were also in my notes. The person who turned me on to this record was a dude named Matt McLean, who I worked with 99, 2000 at the Birmingham Borders, downtown Birmingham Borders. I'd come down from Traverse City anyway. There were a number of very cool dudes there that kept me in the loop. And a couple of things he handed to me were the Beta Band 3 EPs, which is a blast, and Alice Coltrane. So, it was nice to think about Matt. I almost reached out to him to tell him, but made me think of all the people that I've like when I was working retail, there was always somebody who knew a ton more than me that handed me shit, and that was Matt at that store. So that's cool. One thing, speaking to the spirituality of this, Alice went through what in Hinduism is called tapas. It's an aesthetic practice that involves voluntarily performing physical austerities to achieve spiritual power or purification. The word tapas comes from Sanskrit and means heat or ardor. In the Vedas, tapas refers to the inner heat. Anyway, so on and so forth. But she came to feel like she communicated directly with God and God with her through this physical austerity course that she took to sort of right her own ship after John's passing in the years after that. So she believed that fully. So, this whole thing was truly a spiritual journey. It's not lip service at all. She suffered, and then she suffered some more, and she came up with this really a beautiful catalog. But this one, and I urge you all to just check out the live record that came right after it. It's ramming. There's some of it's deeply meditative, and some of it is just, there's 2 bassists and 2 drummers. So, you can imagine. Anyway, I'm glad you all enjoyed it. Thank you for.
I think that's the perfect segue, and we are now into the last half an hour. Just to refresh our co-hosts and any of our listeners returning or new, we work for an hour once a month, and the second half of the hour is a round robin, simply to talk about our current listening passions and obsessions, new discoveries. We randomly select the speaking order for this to try to bring some chaos into an already a little bit spontaneous and crazy time. And we are going to go and tip right now to Amy Rock from Nashville, and we'll be here for another 27 minutes. So I'm grateful to anybody who's listening, or if you're listening on YouTube later, it's worth it to stick around to find out what new records we're all listening to. Take it away, Amy.
Nice. I just want to say to all y'all, I'm so excited to listen to this album we were just talking about again, with just the thoughts of the spirituality element of it, because I went in kind of not knowing about that. So having that in mind on my next listen, I'm really excited to think about that. What have I been listening to? I'm excited to be the first one up because I get to be the first to mention some of these things that I'm sure other people will have things to talk about. But I'm first going to come on as our electronic dance music correspondent of the group and let you know that John Summit has released an album, and that is a big deal. John Summit's a fairly recent DJ. He's from Illinois, but he's been on the festival circuit recently and is playing really great dance and house music. And this album called Comfort in Chaos has a lot of cool guests on it and some of my favorite dance songs from the past year. So recommend checking out John Summit. What else? This one goes out to Gus. I wish he was here tonight, but I'm sure he might mention it too if he had the chance. My Spotify let me know that James Blake and Lil Yachty collaborated on an album called Bad Cameo, and it is really cool. I haven't listened to it too many times yet, but it's the very distinctive James Blake sound and a bit of, I believe, the Lil Yachty vibe from that last album that Gus was stoked on at the last year's year-end wrap-up. What else? The new Childish Gambino album. Haven't quite touched it yet, but I just saw one song on my mix come up that it was a collaboration with Kurunbin, so we'll talk about that, I'm sure. And of course, Jack White's unreleased thing. I was listening to WNXP yesterday, and I won't go a month without dropping my favorite radio station here in Nashville, WNXP. Sorry. But the DJ was getting to play his copy of it on air, and like the songs don't have titles, and they were just like dropping them into bags of whatever you go buy at Third Man Record, Jack White's record label. So the couple songs I heard while I had tuned in were super cool, sounded like old White Stripes, just back to the roots. So I'll be interested to see what y'all think about it. That's it for me. Sorry, I'm so abrupt. There you go, Scott.
Thank you, Amy. So first and foremost, I knew about the James Blake Yachty collaboration, but I was hesitant to check it out. So now I'm definitely going to check it out. And I love Donald Glover. I'm not as familiar with Gambino, but when you said he's collaborating with Khruangbin, that pinged a little light above my head. Here's what I have been listening to. Well, first, I like to show you the picture. So this is a digital only release. Oh, it's all washed out here, but it's Bruce Hazel and John William Harrell. The album is called The Room Where You Are. Bruce Hazel is the front man of an awesome rock and roll band in Charlotte called Temperance League. Kind of garagey, birdsy, Springsteenian. John William Harrell has been playing with numerous different bands in Charlotte. Together, they do this kind of like Baroque singer-songwriter, kind of almost Tom Waitsy kind of thing. And they did a performance last year at this big festival in Charlotte called Charlotte Shout at this beautiful old church in what they call a pianodrome. A pianodrome, for those of you who are keeping score, is an amphitheater made of upcycled pianos. And when I missed it last year, I kicked myself. So they did it again this year. And my friend Margaret and I went to see it, and it was exquisite. And I'm still digesting this record, but it's worth checking out on Bandcamp. It's digital only. Of course, the Petty Country, the Tom Petty tribute. I love Petty. One of my biggest regrets is never seeing him live. 20 songs. A lot of it is bro country, but Chris Stapleton's version of I Should Have Known It is absolutely incendiary. Plus, you got Rhiannon Giddens, Margot Price doing so much justice, all puns intended, to Lone Justice's Ways to Be Wicked, featuring Mike Campbell of the Heartbreakers. Steve Earle's on here. So there's enough on here to keep me excited. My only complaint is they covered 4 songs from Full Moon Fever, but only 2 from The Damned, The Torpedoes, and nothing from the sorely underrated Long After Dark. Stepping off the soapbox. When we met last time, I said I'd just gotten the new Decemberist, but hadn't had a chance to listen to it. I have, and I love it. Ailey Edwards, also known as Alan Edwards, back in the day, he and his brother Chad fronted an alt-country band here in Charlotte called Lou Ford. Yes, they took the name from The Killer Inside Me. My friend Todd used to manage them. They broke up. Several years later, they got back together as the Loudermilks. This is not officially been released yet. It doesn't officially get released until January, but I was at his show last week. It is top quality singer-songwriter, roots music, just delightful stuff. 10 tracks, 1 cover, 6 songs from earlier in his career, and 3 brand new songs. And he had a couple of really awesome musicians who played with them. One of them by the name of Amanda Neal, who not only accompanied him, but opened for him. And she just blew me away. And I'm hoping that this time next year, you're going to hear a lot of buzz around Ailey Edwards. Johnny Blue Skies, a.k.a. Sturgill Simpson. I loves me some Sturgill, and I love this record. 8 tracks. It's short and sweet, and it harkens back sonically to A Sailor's Guide to Earth. And like a lot of the other things in my stack, I'm still processing it, but loving it. Forgot to mention it. Listen to that new Jack White today for the first time. For the first spin, it's pretty rock solid, and I'm looking forward to listening to it some more. I think I mentioned these guys last time. The Whiskey Charmers, our good friend Brian Farabee used to play with them. He is now playing with Rachel Brooks, but the Whiskey Charmers have a new album called Streetlights, I should say. Carrie and Lawrence always rock solid with their very smoky noir cool brand of alt country, and this one is, again, I'm still in the process of processing it, but they never let me down. Last but not least, I am really excited about this. Earlier, I told you that I love Hammond B3 organ. And so last year, there was no Delvon Lamar organ trio album. So I was getting kind of antsy. And well, I found out by accident that Jimmy James of DLO3 is no longer with them. But he is part of this quote unquote super group called Parlor Greens. Jimmy James on the guitar, Tim Carmen of GA20, who I got to see a few months ago, on drums, and Adam Scone on the organ from the Sugarman 3. I've listened to it a couple of times. This is one of those records I'm probably going to wear out, because when there's a Hammond B3 organ record that I like, or a Hammond B3 organ artist I like, it's going to be something I listen to more than anything else. It's going to kind of be like my imaginary film score. It's like, if my life was a movie, this would be my film score. Parlor Greens has got a brand new album out now called In Green We Trust. And with that, Greenberg out.
Hello. I don't have any visual aids. The past month I've been tripping down a few cool rabbit holes. One of them, thanks to you, Andrew, you recommended Son Rompa Para. I might be mispronouncing that. Who I really dug, and I started to like have these fantasies about Joe Strummer collaborating with that band, because I think they were kindred spirits, or they are kindred spirits. One of their songs sounded like Washington Bullets from Sandinista, and I don't think it was accidental. I just think they had some sort of spiritual connection that was unfortunately will never be fulfilled. So listening to them was a lot of fun, and then as Spotify will often do, it'll take you down some path, and a lot of time it's shite. But this was good. I discovered through just listening on after that Son Rompa Para record, Ebo Taylor, Gitkin, and an Ethiopian, New York, Parisian jazz musician. I think he's still around, Mulatu Astaki. Just awesome stuff. I've been listening to Joanna Newsom on vinyl. Speaking of which, I just got a subwoofer, and it's awesome. Thank you. The release, the second single from their forthcoming LP, Linoleum Smooth, The Stocking Foot. Very good stuff. It's just cool to see people writing vital stuff after 30, 40, whatever years, I talked about the Dirty Three the last time we met. Now I have the record Love Changes Everything, and that's wonderful. Just I think it relates to the Alice Coltrane, it's also sort of spiritual, but it's more like wild animal spiritual. There's just a little bit of transcendence going on when they really hit it, which they do a lot on that one. Past couple of months I've been listening to a lot of Lee Scratch Perry and the Upsetters. That's been fun. I somehow slept on him for all this time. There's one particular They Might Be Giants song I've been obsessing about, one version. It's the song Particle Man. They have a release, I don't know, it's called Severe Tire Damage maybe, and it's almost like a Zydeco funk version of Particle Man, and it is awesome. What else? Last night I saw Steve Earle performing solo over in Tarrytown, and the same theater we saw 10,000 Maniacs in. It was a great show. He was really sort of special. It was I was even singing along out loud, if you can believe that. But he sang his late son Justin Townes' amazing song Harlem River Blues, and he just spoke about how his JT died, and he went to I imagine he does this every night just to let people know how dangerous fentanyl is. He said it was in cocaine. He did one out of, they found 3 bumps left. He did the first one, was headed off to the bathroom for whatever reason, and he didn't make it, and that was it. So he spoke to that, and it was pretty powerful. Anyway, otherwise a great show. I had a great time. Nice to have a night out. That's all.
Wow, I love Steve Earle, and nothing gets me more emotional than thinking about Justin Townes Earle. Of course, everybody knows how much I love Jason Isbell, and he wrote a song about JTE that caused much controversy with JTE's widow. I just got to see Jason in Montana, and I'm going to go see Jason open up at Caesars Stadium, aka the New Orleans Superdome, the same Superdome where the New Orleans Saints play football, and the same place where the people in Hurricane Katrina had to go during that tragic September in 2005. And it's very spontaneous. I wanted to go to this Zach Bryan tour really, really, really badly. Tickets are impossible to get, and the way Ticketmaster and all the other ticket brokers work, the prices fluctuate based on demand. All the other shows I was looking at were both too pricey and just completely sold out. And then I saw that there was nosebleeds in my price range for the Superdome. And then I'm like, oh, wait, there's a pit ticket. I'm going to go a little bit to the top of my price range, and I'm going to be in the pit on Thursday for Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit and Zach Bryan. And which brings me to my number one album of the moment, The Great American Bar Scene. It dropped on July 4th, and Rick messaged me on July 5th and asked me what I thought. And I said, I'm having a bad week with the idea of America, so I'm not going to listen to anything with America in the title right now. And then I found out like his 2 out of his last 3 albums have America in the title. And I was just kind of like, it was just really getting on my nerves. But then Birmingham Scott, who we all know from this group, he's going to be here with the year-end version. He has a great Substack. If you've never gone on Scott Winchell's Substack, Winchell World, I highly recommend it. He's a very thoughtful writer. He wrote an amazing think piece on Zach Bryan for these times that we're living in, right? There's a few other things that have happened since our last broadcast on the news that have been a little bit intense, yo. And in the big picture scheme of the 2024 election. And then Ann Powers, amazing rock critic. By the way, I listened to her Joni Mitchell book on Audible driving up to see my brother, which is where I saw Son Rompepera. Completely blew my mind in every regard. That's how I found them, was an accidental festival set. And I love the festival sets that you're pining for. In that case, it was Josiah and the Bonnevilles, Bonnie Light Horseman. Bonnie Light Horseman has an amazing new album. But it was the surprises like that was just such a great surprise. So The Great American Bar Scene is a fantastic new record by Zach Bryan. Ann Powers, who wrote a great new Joni Mitchell book, also has a great new essay about Zach Bryan. Also, let me co-sign Johnny Blue Skies, Sturgill Simpson's new record. I mean, it's just unbelievably good. Unbelievably good. Need to give it about 1,000 more listens. I've been getting back into Sierra Farrell's Trail of Flowers, which released earlier this year, because I've seen her once with Scott in Charlotte, but I'm going to see her twice at the end of the summer. And when we were in Montana, there was another show we went to, which was the Under the Big Sky Festival. Now, I wasn't there on Sierra Day, but this festival featured horses and rodeo bulls. It was a very cowboy cut type scene, even more cowboy than the fake cowboys we see in Nashville, Rick. It was legit cowboys out there. Anyway, so Rick is actually tipped me off to this. He's like, are you at Under the Big Sky? Because Sierra Farrell just like rode through the crowd on a horse to get to her set. She is a goddess. Felice Brothers have a brand new song called The Valley of Abandoned Songs. If you're not familiar with them, they live really near you, Joe. They're from the Catskills up there in New York. They're very, very Dylan-esque. There's a new Dr. Dog. I'm in love with the new Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats album called South of Here. I think he sounds a little bit like Bob Seger in some ways, and I just love this record. I just discovered Madeline Hawthorne, Tales from the Late Nights and Long Drives, because her band was in line at Southwest at 6 a.m. to fly out of Bozeman last week. And I just did that tacky thing, went up to these strangers in an airport, and I'm like, you look like you might be in a band. And they're like, oh, yeah, we're in Madeline Hawthorne's band. So I looked her up. Great new album. Of course, I'm all in for the Jack White record. I've just discovered, by the way, I think it's the track 2 on No Name. That is a religious song, fits the themes of what we talked about tonight. If you've not listened to the new Jack White record, go listen to track 2 and tell me what you think. Also, from some of the music groups I belong to, I just got turned on to India Ramey's new single, The Mountain. I'm excited about the American Aquarium, which drops on Friday. And I just discovered AJ Lee and The Summit, which are a Bay Area folk bluegrass country group that are going to be touring behind their brand new album. I'm excited to check out some of your recommendations, all of you that I have not heard yet. And I'm excited to hear what Rick Quinn has for us to start bring episode 7 towards the finish line. In the last 2 or 3 minutes, we'll come back in. You can comment on whatever else your teammates said or bring in anything you forgot to say. But Rick's going to tell us about his current listening picks.
Thank you, Andrew. And it is, it's always interesting batting cleanup on this because some of the things that I wanted to mention have already been mentioned. But then again, the upside of that is that I'm sitting there thinking, oh, okay, then my music taste is not completely off the charts because these other historically rich, fantastic music critics that I get to gather with each month are picking some of these same things that are striking my fancy. So that's great. I'm excited to listen to the new Jack White. Have not yet, and I'm gonna probably rush to do that right after we get off. The Johnny Blue Skies, aka Sturgill Simpson record. I'll just say I think it's strongly in my top 5 already for the year end. Maybe fighting for number 1. It's just phenomenal, a phenomenal record. The last song shouldn't work in that it brings in like Dwayne Allman guitar licks with Chet Atkins orchestral countrypolitan swell. It's wild. The songwriting though is just phenomenal. Sturgill Simpson is at the top of his game, and it's just a great album. Because many of you recommended it, I dove into the Decemberist album, and what a wild trip that is. It's so many musical influences and styles. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if it made me a fan, but it certainly got my attention. I'll mention a couple of things that haven't been mentioned that really struck me in terms of recent listens. One is the album Santa Cruz by Pedro the Lion. It's continues his mini memoir of his adolescence into early adulthood. It's a coming of age story, a Bildungsroman, a dive into evangelical subculture, sexual awakening, and the whole thing is told. This musical styles shift within the narrative of the album in a way that just kind of blew me away. It's a great album. The other one that I'll mention is Hell's Wells by the singer-songwriter Jesse Wells. I got turned on to Jesse's work through TikTok. He had sort of a similar shtick if we'll call it shtick, as Oliver Anthony did. A guy out in the woods playing guitar and singing sort of folk protest music. That, friends, is where the comparison ends, because Jesse Wells is a phenomenal protest folk songwriter. It's like Woody Guthrie meets With God on Our Side, Bob Dylan, with a heavy dose of John Prine's turns of phrase and sense of humor. He has a way. The song "War Isn't Murder" takes the euphemisms that are often used to dull us to the horror of war, and he turns them and twists them in a way that brings the listener full face looking at the horror of all this. It's just he's a phenomenal album. He also had one on there called the Geriatric Olympics, which is about the election. And unfortunately for him, recent turns of events have sort of already made that song a little dated. But it's a great album. Check it out. And that's it for me for this month.
Rick reminded me of Carsey Blanton's song "The Democrats." If you're willing to handle, I know the future of all civilization is on the ballot and all that kind of stuff. But if you can handle a little bit of self-criticism of the blue team, Carsey Blanton's song "The Democrats" is right up there with the Jesse Wells track that you mentioned, Rick. But I forgot to mention Father John Misty. He released a track only by text message. So with like Jack White sending a track in a bag, an unmarked album in a bag, he sent a text, and it's to some platform I've never heard of. You can only listen to it in your browser, as far as I can tell it. But it's like an 8-minute Father John Misty song, and it's like all Father John Misty epics. It's about the meaning of life and the end of civilization and the problem with God and sexuality and everything. And it's to a funk kind of Bee Gees 70s white funk kind of vibe. So new Father John Misty coming soon as well. Last rings into the circle here, gang.
I have been dying to say something, and that's hats off to Rick Quinn, because you are like the Nostradamus of our group here, because who would have known last year when we were making our year-end picks that within the last 3 weeks, it seems, the world now belongs to Chapel Roan.
Yes. We're just living in it. It's her world.
It's her world. We live in it. And I what I've heard, I like. I'm like, I think we're living in a renaissance of really well-made pop music. Mm-hmm. I can't rip on pop music anymore. And she's one of the reasons why.
Her Tiny Desk, if you guys have not watched her Tiny Desk concert, and it's a lot more stripped down musically, which is what I always love, the stripped down musically. So the Chapel Roan Tiny Desk concert is all that.
Yeah.
Can I say my piece about the new Decemberist record? I totally forgot it. I actually bought the vinyl because I'm a sucker for packaging, and I just wanted to push it because I don't know, it felt wrong. I wasn't getting anywhere with that record. Vinyl sort of changed the whole equation, because I thought those first 4 songs were great, and then you listen to the next 4, which are way slower in tempo and emotion, and then it's just like, what the hell? Why did they? They started off with such life, and then they got really maudlin, and without changing a side on an actual vinyl record, it's hard to separate those. But that time flipping the record sort of resets your own ears, and those second 4 songs, I came to enjoy them a lot better. And then side 3 was also very good, and then side 4, like I couldn't do it. I don't think I made it all the way through. Joan in the Garden. The thing that came to mind is Mr. Creosote. the Monty Python skit. Like, it's just he's stuffed himself with everything, and it's coming out in this song. Can't stop it. It's a continuous stream of like everything he wanted to put in a song that he's restraining himself. And then put that out. So it's awesome.
I think they need to do an edit of that song. It could be a lot shorter.
You get it down to like 12, 13 minutes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of debate in the Decemberist fan community about the long sections at the end, and there's really 2 or 3, depending on how you bracket it. There's 2 or 3 long sections. We could have a whole episode just on Joan in the Garden. Okay, it's we're at the top of the hour. Our next episode is in August. We have not set the date or picked the record. We are going to go into our secret backstage meeting room right now and confer with Scott Greenberg on a date and on an album for August. And you can follow each of us on our individual socials to get the word. Please, if you like this, come back next month. Thank you all for tuning in to episode number 7 of the Music Nerds Record Club. Thank you, Joe, for bringing us our record of the month, and for each of my other 4 colleagues, or as Rick called you, our esteemed colleagues,
Yes.
For being here tonight. Good night, everybody.
Constituents.
Till next time.
Have fun storming